everyone. Welcome to All Things Grace Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Michelle Majors. And listen, today's show is an awesome episode because we are talking about something that's very near and dear and appropriate to my world, and that is beating up on ourselves. Can we just stop beating up on ourselves already and have more grace? So that's what we're talking about today. And I have a very distinguished and amazing, and might I add, beautiful guest today, Acamea Deadwiler. Excuse me. In addition to being a speaker, author, host of the podcast Love Lines, which I got to find out about. Acamea is a Pushcart Prize nominated memoirist, and essayist. She's the author of her own memoir, Daddy's Little Stranger, about the disconnection and rejection of her father and how that's impacted her life, and the book Single That, dispelling the top 10 myths of the single woman, which happened to be lauded by Publishers Weekly. So congratulations for that.
Thank you so much.
It has appeared in Bellevue Literary Review, North American Review, and Beyond Words Literary Magazine, among other commercial and literary publications. Acamea's media features include the New York Post, Cosmopolitan, Bustle, and the Fox Television Network. Acamea, welcome to All Things Grace Podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. So I want to first hear a little bit about your story and how this book, Daddy's Little Stranger, came to life.
Well, for the longest time, I believed not having a father didn't affect me at all. I was kind of like, I turned out great. I don't need him, I'm smart. I did this. I accomplished this. I really work to be a good person and treat people well. And it's like, it didn't affect me at all. And it wasn't until, I matured and started to really think about why I am the way I am and why I do the things that I do that may not necessarily be like, wrong or malicious, but we are the culmination of our experiences. And it made me realize that not having my father and just going back to times when I waited for him and he didn't come and things like that, and that rejection did things inside of me that I wasn't aware of until later in life. It shaped, a large part of who I became. And so as I started to think about that, I wrote essays about particular experiences, sitting in front of a window, waiting for him to come get me, meeting his mother and hoping that he would stop by her house one day, things like that. And so I had this collection of essays. And when I signed my publishing contract, my publisher was like, I know you wrote this as essays, but I think there's a thread here that you could connect and actually tell a story. I think this could be a memoir. And the publisher was right. When I really sat down and looked inside of myself and was honest with myself and asked myself, like, what is this story about? This particular, event in my life, how did it shape my story? I was able to, connect it into a full-length memoir. And that's how it turned into Daddy's Little Stranger.
Have you had any communication with your father about the book, about anything?
No, no, I don't want to spoil the book, but no, I haven't seen him in decades. I had a book launch event here in Las Vegas where I live a little while ago, and I did have a nightmare that he showed up to the event, that he saw me post about it on like social media or someone told him or something like that, and he got wind of it and came by. And I woke up like really like shook. Like, what if that did happen? Like, what if you heard about it and, found where I was and came to the launch and was unhappy? So I haven't had any communication with him about the book because I haven't had any communication with him at all. But I have, I guess, subconsciously, this fear that he would find out that I wrote about him.
As someone who also has the experience of not having a father figure in her life, and I don't know if you had a father figure, but definitely not a father. In my case, I go through life, and it's one of those things, you don't know what you don't know. I don't know what I'm missing. And I remember I ran into a guy and actually started dating. I remember dating him when we were younger, and we reconnected as adults. And I was a teen at the time, and late teens, and so was he. And it was really interesting. We were talking, and he very casually said, Yeah, part of the reason why I did date you was that there was no one I had to answer to or be accountable to. And I was like, well, that's bold,
Yeah,
right?
wow.
No father. He's like, I just didn't know what it was, how to, I didn't want to answer a bunch of questions. I didn't want to, you were a good person. The relationship was fine. It was great. There was nothing wrong. But
Mhm.
what made him more okay with it was that in his world, he didn't know how to be an adult. And he knew
Mm.
if there was a father figure, he would be held accountable to treat me a certain way.
Mhm.
He didn't
Mm.
want to be accountable. And not because I just don't want to be accountable, but because, well, maybe, but also because at that age, that just, having punitive measures when you break a
Yeah.
girl's heart is different than, or being held accountable to
Yeah,
someone's
that
heart.
scared him. Yeah.
Somebody scared him as well. But it was the first time I thought, what other things are going on?
Right, that I
I
don't
don't
know about.
know, or what things am I not protected from, or just start
Mhm. Mm.
thinking about as an adult, like some of the questions is not just having that presence there. It
Mhm.
was also like, wow, I wonder how I've been compromised
Mm.
in ways because I didn't have someone to say, that's not how you treat my
Yeah,
daughter.
you're not doing that to her.
You're not
Yeah.
doing that to her. Or either, hey, that's not how my dad treats me. You're not going to treat me
Yeah.
this way, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
so I
having an example.
found that really interesting. So tell me about your healing process. Was there a point where you were
Mhm.
angry or bitter or frustrated or what? Well, I'm
Mhm.
sure maybe frustrated, whatever
Yeah.
the emotion was. How did you
Um,
reconcile that?
mhm. I've never really felt angry. And just to your point, I didn't have a father figure most of my life either. So it wasn't just not having my father. I didn't have a father figure until I was an older teenager and my mother remarried. And that kind of that gave me a male in the household who, took care of us and was supportive, never did any harm. But it was so late in my life, we didn't establish a relationship. It was difficult to establish a relationship. So that's interesting to think about, like what you lost and, the ways you've been compromised by not having that, father figure behind you saying no and yes, and having that example to say, this isn't how my dad treats me, or this isn't how my dad treated my mom, so this isn't right. And those aren't things I thought about. So I've never felt angry because I felt like I was okay. I got to a point where I was like, I'm fine without my father. I've made it this far. I'm happy with who I've become. I have struggled with resentment, and
Mhm.
for him, it was more overt for other people than it was for him because he wasn't in my life. So he was kind of like this faceless person, and
Mhm.
I think it's harder to hold strong feelings when you don't have an object, to place them against. Like, if you and your mother had some tension, you can see her and feel, those feelings and things like that. You have some place to direct it. But when you don't have a place to direct it, I think my resentment for him was more subconscious, as I got older. But resentment in general had been a struggle for me, and I believe that it started with him and the rejection that I received from him. And
Mm.
how I overcame it was first acknowledging it and being honest with myself and saying, why can't I mention this person's name without this snarky tone, or without saying
Mhm.
something negative about them? Or why do I tense up? I can't even talk about this person without tensing up. I'm rehearsing, things to say to them and to remind them of, the horrible things they did. I think that all stems from resentment. And but the first step was acknowledging it, and then unraveling why I felt that way, and then just consciously acting against my nature. So
Mhm.
if I didn't want to answer the phone when this person called, I would make myself answer. As long as I could emotionally handle it, like I'm not going to harm myself to maintain a relationship with anyone. Or just if it feels uncomfortable to reach out to this person and say I love you, when I feel like I can do it, I'm going to do it, and just making those conscious decisions over and over starts to become subconscious, and then I don't have to think about it as much. It just has started to become a natural disposition and part of who I am.
Mm. So did this process or this experience then lend itself to your second book, Single That?
Mhm.
If so, can you tell me like how one kind of morphed into the
Mhm.
other? or how that book came across.
Yeah, that's interesting because I actually planted the seed for this book in Single That without even knowing it.
Mm,
Because Single That was about, my dating experiences and dating men. I date men, so it was about, how my interactions with them and the misconceptions that males and even women we make about each other when a woman is single, and how we judge them on the basis of relationship status. Like if a woman is married, we make certain assumptions about her. If she's single and not in her 20s anymore, we make certain assumptions about her, and you go in looking for like, hey, what's wrong with her, or what's wrong with you? So it was more about that, just judging women by relationship status, or trying to determine who they are, as though that is the sole aspect of your being, as
right.
though you are not a whole and complete person. But in the process of that and recollecting these experiences, I had to get to the point where I discuss like, this is how I've behaved in relationships. And I know part of it is because I've never had a relationship with my father. Like
Mm,
I knew that's part of why I behave this way, or why I might be kind of distant or just quick to leave people and things like that. And so I planted the seed in Single That in assessing, my dating experiences and this tendency to attach women to their relationship status. And then later I was like, there's something there. Like I should explore that more, that how I interact in relationships and expand that into, how I've grown in other aspects of my life and how this affected me, the child me. And but yeah, the seed was planted there without me knowing. And then it was later where I was like, there's something here. Maybe I should explore this.
hmm So can you talk about a couple of the myths? You've there were 10 of them. You've mentioned a couple, I think, so far.
hmm
But can you talk about a few of the myths that you discuss in the book?
I think one of the big ones is that like a woman who's been single for what would be considered a while is somehow bitter. Like
Mm,
like, oh, you hate men and that's why that's why you haven't been with anyone in a while, or kind of the spinster type of label where it's like you're bitter and you don't give men a chance. And maybe that's true, but it can't be an assumption. Like just because you're single doesn't mean you're bitter. Like plenty of women are single and happy and live full lives and have no problem with men and date men all the time. They just may not want to be, committed to one at the moment.
mhm,
And then I
mhm,
think another one is just this misconception that a single woman is profoundly broken. I think we all have, areas of our lives that we can work on, and will always have areas of our lives that we can work on. No one gets to the end, of the best version of themselves. Like you don't get to a point where you say, okay, I'm perfect. I'm the best I'm ever going to be. I'm done growing. Like we're constantly growing because we're constantly, experiencing new things and new situations and new relationships. So we all, have areas that we can work on. But I think when a woman is single and like I said, and not in her 20s anymore, there's this misconception that she's somehow more profoundly broken than the average person or woman.
mhm. How do you think that is different between a man who's single and is, I don't know, 40s, 50s, 60s, whatever that number is, versus a woman?
hmm I think it's different in a lot of ways. If you're an older guy and you're single, you're kind of called like, oh, a bachelor or a lone wolf. It's like you never grow out of the bachelor phase, It's like
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
like you're always a bachelor, but with a woman, it's like you get to a point where it's no longer okay to be single. And you don't
Mhm,
have all these judgments and labels because it's assumed if a man not didn't want to be single, he didn't have to be. He could go out and get a woman and marry a woman today, or whoever you choose to marry or partner with. There's this assumption that he could go out there and be married, and that the man is the chooser and therefore he is choosing to be single, and
mhm.
that is just somehow not possible with women.
Yeah. So, are you single and dating now? Or if you want to answer, are you single and dating now? And if so, how has this work, all this work to do this book, informed
Mhm.
like your experience as someone dating? I once heard, and I'll let you come back to this. I once
Yeah.
heard um, someone say that, and this is along racial lines,
Mhm.
that Black women are go straight to looking for a mate,
Mhm.
while their white counterparts are I think it's the same, but they were saying that they are looking to date. Like they allow themselves to date.
Hmm.
So this mating versus dating thing is like when you walk
Yeah.
to it, the things that you're looking for, the experiences you're looking to have are, I would say, markedly different. They're pretty
Hmm.
different if you're looking for a mate or if you're looking for, hey, we're just dating, we're having fun. And if it leads to that, great. But I'm
Yeah.
clear what this is right now, and I'm enjoying the phase and the evolution of
Hmm.
does that resonate at all? I don't know. So
It doesn't resonate with me. Like, I've always been a dater. Like, I have to really, really connect with someone to commit to a relationship with them and really think that they are good for me and a healthy addition to my everyday life. And I also have friends who have no problems dating. I have 2 friends who are married, and I have 2 that aren't, you know? So it's
mhm,
not like we all just ran out and married the first person who we dated. So I
yeah.
don't yeah, so I can't say that my experience agrees with that. And I know a lot of women, a lot of peers who aren't married and who have never been married. So I can't say that my experience agrees with that because I know plenty of women who date, and even if they want to get married, they don't just like latch on to the first person willing to marry them.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're gonna pivot. Kind
Mhm.
of gonna go back to the title of the show. Can we just stop beating up on ourselves
Mhm.
already? And I think this was really good because this is something that those who are socialized as women are brilliant at beating up on
Mhm.
ourselves. I'm not enough. The TV tells me like this Ozempic thing, you
Oh, yeah.
know, and it's there are people who um I have a friend who is taking it, and I can just say that the relief of not having the weight, the relief
Mm.
of not thinking about food all the time, as many, folks do when you are overweight, because I think there are addictive. I can get into what I think they put in our food. I can get into all of that. That's another show. But I
Mhm.
do think that there are things in the food that keep us addicted to, the foods and not being able to think clearly and all of those things. That
Mhm.
said, finally having something that feels like some relief from the addiction of thinking
Mm.
about food, what am I going to eat, or beating ourselves up around food and all of that. So even this wave of people who are taking the Ozempic just to get some relief from that addiction and from all.
Mhm.
But up until that point, there's this beating up the circle of weight and weight loss, the circle of I keep choosing the same kind of partner and these things happen, beating up on
Mm.
ourselves. We're not good enough. We don't look good enough. We're not making enough money. We're single and nobody all
Mhm.
which we beat up on ourselves and do not allow ourselves the experience of grace and acceptance. Are there first, can you tell me your thoughts on that as a concept, and then I'll
Mhm.
dig a little deeper on your response.
Yeah, it's interesting that you brought that up because, if I have friends or family members who expressed an interest in losing weight and they just really want the quickest, fastest solution because the idea of, eating differently and working out more frequently, like, yeah, we know that may eventually render some results, but it seems like it's such a long process,
Mhm,
and everyone's body is different. And so it's like that's not always the key. We process food differently. But I agree, a lot of it is what we put into our food, and that's a conversation for another day, or what, our food services, how they grow things and the
mhm.
additives that are in it are a huge part of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, and something I used to be like, "Well, why don't you just do this and we can go to the gym together and it's not that serious to go and take this and do this." But I learned to have grace for those conversations and for those individuals who feel this way and who are willing to take something like Ozempic because they are looking for that relief, because I truly don't know how it feels to be in their bodies. And
Mhm,
I don't know how it feels. I don't know what it's doing to them, mentally or emotionally, or how badly they want to lose this weight. So I
mhm,
can't tell them, how they should feel or how they should approach it. From a
mhm,
place of love, I would hope that you don't do anything unsafe or unhealthy, but at the same time, you have to have grace because I don't know what it's like to be in their body, and I totally understand the idea of just wanting some relief.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, and so Well, getting to going a little like a layer underneath that and talking
Mhm.
about the self-harm and the self-judgment,
Mm.
all the things that make us think that we're not enough or
Mhm.
we can't do it alone, whatever it is.
Mhm.
And this is not an indictment. Let me be clear. This is not an indictment on people who make that choice.
Yeah.
It's for people who get to that point. They're at that point for whatever reasons that
Mhm.
I do not understand.
Mhm.
I'm one of those type of people where if you can find something that gives you some self, like
Yeah.
feeling like you're making progress and you feel like you're getting better and stronger and you feel better in
Mhm.
your body, I'm
Mhm.
the last person to say that's not the way.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
is a way, right?
Mhm.
So, and the ways that in which we choose and move,
Mhm.
that's unique for every person, right?
Yeah,
What
absolutely.
I'm speaking to is, um, what we're experiencing as like the epidemic of
Mhm.
struggling with our bodies
Mhm.
and the mental stuff that what we see on TV, and the
Mhm.
mental stuff that comes with it. That's just one way. I was pointing out that's just one way that we beat up on ourselves, but there's lots of different ways.
Yeah.
And so my question to you is, in what ways have you found yourself not giving yourself mercy and grace and
Mhm.
yourselves and up on yourself? And how did you move through that?
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. It's like I think there are a lot of ways we beat up on ourselves, and if it's not one thing, it's another. So it's like you can take care of the one thing, you can lose all the weight, and then we'll find something else not to like, about ourselves, unfortunately. And I do think the media has a lot to do with it, and especially social media, this, unrealistic image of beauty and how women are supposed to look, that definitely plays into it. Social media has given us a lot of benefits, but it's also caused a lot of harm, as far as the way we see ourselves and our lives. And for me, I kind of I fell into kind of like chronic perfectionism.
Mm,
From the time I was a child, I felt like, I had to be perfect in order for people to love me, and I was trying to be perfect so that my father would love me. Like,
mhm,
why doesn't he love me? I'm doing everything right, I'm on the honor roll in school, I'm doing everything that a parent could be proud of or that my family could be proud of, and so I fell into this trap of just needing to be perfect. And so if I get up and I say I'm gonna do X, Y, and Z today. If I only did X and Y, I'll probably beat myself up that day and like, oh, you don't deserve this because you didn't do that third thing you were supposed to do to achieve it, or you just sat around and watched TV all day. You don't really want this like you say you want it.
mhm,
Instead of showing myself grace to say like, hey, sometimes what you need is to sit and watch TV all day, you can't just go and go and go. Sometimes you need that break and you need to relax and you need to show yourself grace and honor the space that you're in, especially when you know that I get out there and do what I need to do. And I'm an ambitious person. Just because this one day, like maybe I didn't cross everything off my list, it doesn't mean that I'm undeserving of whatever it is I'm working toward. So that's probably my biggest thing for me, just showing myself grace to not have to always be perfect, so to speak, and to be able to just do something because it brings me joy, even if it took me away from something that I maybe thought I needed to do.
mm, mm. So even in that conversation or thinking through that, well, actually, let me pivot, and then I'm gonna. Hopefully, I can circle back and tie all these things together. But I asked a guest, a podcast guest that I just had an interview with, on a scale from 1 to 10, right?
Mhm.
One is my life sucks.
Mm,
Want to I want to leave and I need a do over.
mm,
This is not the life I think I was supposed to have.
mhm,
10 is I cannot imagine a more blissful and amazing and almost miraculous, beautiful, great life. Like
mm.
a great, great life. What would you give yourself? And if it's not a 10, do you know and are you willing to share
Mhm,
what you think would make it a 10?
mhm. Wow, I mean, even the question to think about it, kind of almost made me tear up a little when you were talking about the 10, because that's where I want to get to.
Mhm.
And I know that getting to the 10 really isn't about anything external in my life. And that's kind of the perspective I started to adopt and nurture, is that it's in me. So I can get to a 10 because it's not about if I get this book deal, or if I get this appearance, or if I sell this many copies of a book. I think we have to learn to be at a 10 no matter what's happening around us. So I would say I've done a lot of just like work on myself and reading, as far as, cultivating joy and energy and things like that. I always recommend The Four Agreements as a book that everyone should read. Yeah, it was life-changing. It helped me, kind of shift my perspective to one that is healthier, and that could help me get to a 10. So I would say I'm probably
Let
at
me,
a
let me,
9. Go ahead,
okay.
I'm sorry.
No, go finish, and then I'm going to come back
Okay.
to Four
No, I
Agreements.
was gonna say, I would say I'm probably at a 9. But I know that I can get to a 10, and what's going to get me to a 10 has nothing to do with external, like, factors or accolades.
Mm,
I want if I can become an even more, like, loving, considerate, relational human being, who is, you know, vicious in creating joy, I know I can get to a 10.
that's awesome. I've never heard anyone. It takes someone, a literary person, to say "vicious" with joy. You really get it. Like, oh yeah, I know it. I
Like,
know.
wow, that's it.
No, and I know exactly what that means, right?
Mhm.
So you know that, conceptually, right? But
Mhm.
do you feel that you move through life holding that, like keeping that at the presence? If that's going to give you a 10 life, and,
Mhm.
hey, and 9 is awesome, okay. But if that's going to give you even a 9.5,
Right.
do you? Can you? Is that something that you would put in front of you more so than the accolades and
Mm.
prize and that, best author, best-selling author title?
Mhm.
Do
Mhm.
you feel like you keep that in the forefront of your moves in life?
I'm learning to.
Mhm,
I'm working to.
mhm.
Because I do believe, like, there are plenty of people who are celebrated and acclaimed and accomplished, and they're supremely unhappy in life, and I know how that can happen, because that external validation can only take you so far.
Mhm.
I get an award today, tomorrow I'm down and out and sad again. It's like you
Yeah.
need this constant feeding of it, if that's what you're using to keep you, at the level you want to be at. So I do try to keep it in the forefront. Most times I'm not always successful with that. Some days I do better than others, and then that's where the giving myself grace comes in. If I had a bad day, or I beat up on myself today, or I focused on the wrong thing, I go to bed and I say, okay, tomorrow's going to be better,
Mhm.
and that's kind of how I reset myself. But I am working and learning to keep the internal peace and joy in the forefront.
Yeah. So I want to go back to the Four Agreements.
Okay,
Um,
5 agreements. Yeah, 4 agreements. You're right.
I was gonna say, wait, they added a fifth. Now hold on. Okay,
They actually did add a 5th, but it's a separate book.
they did.
Yes.
Ah, now I got it. See, so now I'm so tempted to just like really quickly just go and see what it is.
And see what it is.
Yeah. Do you remember what they were? What all four agreements are?
I do.
Okay.
Don't take anything personal.
Hmm.
Be impeccable with your word.
Hmm.
Always do your best.
Yep.
And don't make assumptions.
I'm writing them down because I want to. Because all of those, when you talk about the way we beat ourselves up,
Mhm.
my belief is we are beating ourselves up because there's something we are taking personally. There
Yes.
is something
Always.
that you have assigned a meaning to something that was said or done, and you
Mhm.
are now making that about you.
Yes.
Okay. Be impeccable with your word is the second reason why we beat ourselves up, because if
Mhm.
you can't be true to yourself, right?
Mhm.
If we kept our word, there would not be this epidemic, as we were talking about earlier, of obesity, because our
Yeah.
word is how many first of the year,
Yeah.
how many Monday I'm going to start, right?
Mhm.
And we break our word to ourselves.
Mhm.
And so we don't honor the commitments that we know will make ourselves better.
Mhm.
But also because we don't keep our word to ourselves, we allow others to abuse
Mhm.
harm us because we are not impeccable with the word of what we say. This is how I want to be treated, right?
Ooh, yeah.
This is what I demand.
Yes. And if I'm not treated that way, I'm not going to stay in this relationship, you know?
That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And then the third way that we beat up on ourselves is we make assumptions. You
Mhm.
tell me something. Listen, I was on the plane, or I was boarding a plane to go to Boston, and I had a client that, it was just a long day. I'd missed the flight, just totally whatever. So I missed the flight. I ended up having to take a red eye. I got on the red eye, and there was a woman in my seat. And
Uh-oh.
the plane was pretty much empty because it was a red eye.
Yeah.
There was available back, going towards the back and all of these things. And she said in a pretty gracious way, like, can you go sit somewhere else? And she kind of pointed like to the back, like, well, there's she's, in the back. All I heard was, what in the Rosa Parks? You are not going to send me to the back of the plane. Like, as a white woman, I heard it and it's just like,
Yeah. Yeah.
and they have these things around, don't interact, don't engage when you are hungry, angry, lonely, tired.
Mhm.
Halt, right?
Mhm.
That whole halt thing. I was
Yeah.
3 out of 4 of them.
You're almost all of them, huh?
The only thing I wasn't lonely. In
Mhm.
fact, as an introvert, I crave being alone, right? So
Right,
that,
same.
that was not a thing. But the assumption I made was based on the meaning that I gave it, was based on my
Mhm.
identity.
Yeah.
If you were an elderly Black woman, I would have said, of course.
Yeah, you would've said, "Sure. Sure,
If
you
she
stay
were
right
just an
there."
elderly
Mhm.
woman, period. I have values
Mhm.
around the elderly where I don't care
Mhm.
what she would have been. If she was an elderly,
Mhm.
I would have went to the back of the bus.
Mhm.
Even after the flight attendant said, "Hey, we got a seat in first class." I
Mm.
I didn't want it, but I didn't want it because I need a window seat. It wasn't
Yeah.
a window seat, right? If it
Yeah,
was a
this is
window
my
seat,
seat.
I'd have said,
Mhm.
"See ya," But I would have done
Mhm.
it with probably a little, because at the time I interpreted it in a way that
Mhm.
it wasn't going to be no good, right? And so we
Yeah.
beat up on ourselves because we
Mhm.
interpret things and we make assumption about what people are saying, and we have no
Mhm.
idea where people are coming from a lot of times,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
what in their life experience led them to do the thing, right? So
Yeah.
so that means it's really never about you. It
Never.
wasn't about her. That was
Yeah.
about me and how all the things are going on with
Mhm.
me. And so I think that we beat up on ourselves a lot because we do
Mhm.
things and say things operating from assumption, and
Mhm.
we know that to be true.
Mhm. Yeah, and again, like you said, 2 out of the 4, you took it personal and you made an assumption.
That's right.
And, like, who's to say that if it wasn't you, that she still wouldn't have requested whoever it was if they could sit somewhere else? But, you assumed it's me. It has something to do with me.
Absolutely. Why
Yeah,
would you ask me to do that?
yeah, of all people. I mean, she
There
should
you
have
go.
exercised a little more self-awareness, to be fair, but but yeah, honestly, like you said, you took it personal, you made an assumption. It is an assumption. If it was such and such, she wouldn't have said that. It was because, it was me, so you
Right.
internalize it and make it about you when it may not have been.
Mhm.
It may have been, but it may not have been. And that's the other side that we don't consider. That's why you can't take it personally. You can't make an assumption because you really don't know like what's going on in other people's heads or why they behave the way they behave. That's why you set yourself up for failure when you take something personally because you really don't know why that person is behaving this way or why they did what they did. So those assumptions and taking everything personal is doing yourself a disservice because it's not based on anything you could possibly know.
That's
You're not inside that person and you don't know why they do the things they do or behave the way they behave. So
Yep.
yeah, that's a great example. Wow.
Yeah, and and it's just so natural. It's so natural just to assume what somebody said. I don't
Mhm.
It was amazing how we operate in this place. So I was talking to someone about the Will Smith slap, right?
Oh.
And I didn't see the video. I can't. And I just
You can't.
not two Black men. It was just hard because I love them both a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah,
But
you
I
don't wanna see
read
that.
his memoir. I
I
read
have
Will Smith's
too.
web.
One of the
I
best
was like,
memoirs I've ever read.
and if
Yeah.
the only thing better than reading it is listening to it.
Mm.
It's so good. It's so
Yeah, it's
good.
so good. It's
And
brilliant.
when he did it, I was like, "Ah, well." because
Mhm.
I read his book and I knew that one, he kind of tends to sabotage himself.
Mhm.
Great experience, with big things.
Mhm.
Two, he also his whole world is about I'm not a coward. I can take care of my
Yeah.
mother. It
Proving
was all
himself.
about his mother. He
Mhm.
opens it up talking about all these accolades, all these things I
Mhm.
do is to hide the fact that deep down I feel like I'm a coward.
Yeah,
I
yeah, and he
love
beats himself up for it. He beats himself up for not
this.
acting when he felt like he should have acted, and
That's
yeah,
right.
so you
And
could
he
kinda see that coming.
Yeah. So I'm
Mm.
like, of course, when she gave him that look, he was like, "Uh-oh." He
I
just
gotta do something, yeah.
acted into that trauma, you
Mhm.
know? And
Mhm.
so when I saw it, I was like, You gotta read the book. Like, this
Right,
makes
if you read the book,
perfect
it will
sense.
all make
It'll
sense.
all make sense. Read the
Mhm.
book, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
what I love about it is that he actually, through his memoir, and that's like tying back to, well, I knew I could tie it back to you. I was getting there. But in his memoir, he gave us permission to own when we fall short,
Mhm.
to own, because the fourth agreement is always do your best. I
Mhm.
believe if you look at the trajectory and hear his stories, this dude was a impeccable, I'm going to do it or I'm
The
going to die
best.
trying. I'm
Mhm, right.
the best of my ability, right?
Mhm.
So when he can't operate at his best, we saw it live. We
Yeah,
saw him not show up as his
as
best.
his best, yeah.
And
We
he
saw
went
it
into
manifest.
Oh, oh, and there
Mhm.
was no grace because nobody
Yeah.
had context. He just was just this dude who slapped somebody.
Right,
There
who
was
made
a whole
a
world.
joke.
There was a
Mhm.
whole machine operating behind that
Behind
page,
that.
you
Yeah.
know? And so
Mhm.
I think the power of memoirs is that it allows people in to your life and
Mhm.
see ourselves. And so
Mhm.
because of that, we can make different decisions. We can think about
Mhm.
different. What would you want people to take away from that book, from Daddy's Little Stranger?
That you can heal and move forward from the things that you believe might define you. You
Hmm.
can write a new story. You don't have to be addicted to your story. So like, yeah, this may have happened to me and it may have shaped a lot of who I became, but just the very fact that I'm acknowledging this and I know this now makes me more aware of how it may be manifesting in my life, and that means I can consciously change it. You can write a new story. You can grow in the areas you need to grow in, and those things that you've been through don't have to define you.
Hmm. Before I let you go, I just want to go just a little bit deeper into that
Sure.
statement, addicted to your story. Can you
Mm.
please talk about that, unpack it, lay it out, cook with it, whatever you got. Like, I want to hear addicted to your story because
Mhm.
some of us don't know who we are without that
Exactly,
story.
exactly. Exactly, and that's the addiction. That's the addiction to where you can't talk about yourself or you can't talk about your life without talking about this thing that happened to you. You carry it with you wherever you go. If someone doesn't know this about you, you don't feel right, you have to tell them. And I was doing that for a very long time, and of course, I still have to do it a little now because I'm writing books about it, even though my books are actually, gearing steering you towards overcoming it. You have to name the thing and acknowledge the thing to be able to overcome it. But
Mhm.
being addicted